All right, so can y'all hear me all right? There's a little bit of reverb, so I have to. Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming to the Mixer. This event is live streamed on our YouTube, and you can catch the recording there. Last call for snacks and drinks are around 8:30 for tonight. Some people requested gushers, and if we donate a certain amount, we'll be able to follow through with that request. Maybe. Let's see. After the presentation, let me first introduce our guest tonight. It's Lauren Brown.
Yes.
She's a fabulous illustrator. I'll get more to that shortly later, but first more intro on the other ASIFA-South stuff. So yeah, next month we're going to have a themed event, and we're gonna, after this presentation, we're gonna put a bunch of things on the whiteboard.
We're gonna vote? Are we gonna vote on them?
I don't know.
All right.
It's the brainstorming process. So if there's one that's definitely favorited amongst everyone, then we'll follow through with that.
Okay.
Just a reminder, everyone, to be respectful and kind to each other. There's upcoming volunteer opportunities coming up, so stay tuned. Our call for International Animation Day screening will go up end of August. And let's see. And also, by popular demand, we put up new resources and added on our website, including networking events in Atlanta and more. And stay tuned after, because the piece that I'm holding, we're going to raffle it off to a
RSVP, to an RSVP.
to a random RSVP winner.
Who made that piece?
Did anybody not RSVP yet? Did anybody not RSVP? Make sure, find one of us, or go to our website and RSVP, so that way you can be entered in the raffle.
I don't know if it's gonna work.
It's there though.
Yeah.
It's there.
All right, so as I mentioned previously, our guest tonight is Lauren Brown. She is an award-winning illustrator with 12 years of experience in professional illustration and conventions. She received MFA from SCAD. Here's a few of her roles that she's been a part of. So she's currently the art director at Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering. She's worked for Zynga, which is like the app. It makes a lot of, right?
Words with Friends, Farmville, everybody, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody's played Zynga stuff.
You said it a lot more eloquently.
Oh,
than
no,
I
you're
did. I'll just name a few more things. EA, Wild Sea Games, Floyd County Productions. She's been a lead and senior artist on titles such as Archer, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Harry Potter, Puzzle and Spells. So
We don't rep J.K. Rowling though.
all right. So how was that intro?
It's pretty good.
That's all right.
Oh yeah, also, we forgot to mention, I'm also the co-host of a podcast on YouTube called Painted in Color. It is a podcast that is dedicated to uplifting marginalized artists and inspiring everybody to take care better of their mental health. So.
Okay, all right. So with all that experience in all these different projects, ranging from Magic the Gathering, from the mobile app games, can you kind of walk us through the journey of these different platforms, like your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So along my artistic journey, I guess, what I've realized is that a lot of artists, you can look at any of their journeys and no two journeys are the same. It's all a winding, weird path. It's really, really different and varied. And mine was, I was a, young artist who just loved to draw every single day and loved anime and video games and all that stuff. And I really just wanted to somehow contribute to animation. I didn't know in what aspect or what regard, but I just knew that I wanted to do that. Now, when I went to undergrad at a school called Montclair State University, I don't think they really knew how to guide anybody to that because animation was very new in the school. I'm sure things have changed now, but back then the program was just getting started, and I kind of rolled out of animation and started to go into illustration instead because I was like, I'm not getting really the education I want here, but I know that I also love illustrating and creating something interesting out of one image. So when I graduated, I wanted more education and went to SCAD for my master's. And I also eventually wanted to be a professor too, to teach fine people like you. But that hasn't happened yet, soon to be. But when I was at SCAD, the illustrators also didn't know where to put me because I knew that I didn't want to do editorial, I didn't want to do children's books per se, but I knew that I wanted to somehow still contribute to animation. And then I went over to the animation department in this creepy building. I don't know if anybody went to SCAD here, but there's a, if anybody went to SCAD Savannah, there we go. There's an animation building called Montgomery Hall, which is a renovated coffin factory, and that's where they put all the animators. There's no windows, there's no sense of the day passing, and it's 24 hours, so you never leave. But I went to that building and hung out with all of my friends, and what I realized was that there were a bunch of different productions going on there that were all student films, and some of these projects were up to 60, like crews of up to 60 people, all students. And when I was working on my own projects, I got recruited by a bunch of different people, and they were like, hey, do you want to work on my film? Do you want to be a character designer? Do you want to do backgrounds? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. And then that's where I realized what the actual animation pipeline was supposed to be, was that it was made up of all these different roles, and that funneled up to this big production, which I somehow didn't realize before. And once I graduated, I realized that that was the most accurate representation of what it actually looked like to work on a production. So the summer after SCAD, I stayed in Savannah, and I wanted to just like, work on my portfolio, do freelance, whatever, and happened to get reached out to by a background director at Floyd County Productions. And I think a month later is when I moved out, packed all my stuff and moved out to Atlanta to start my first role as a professional artist. So I was a background artist at Floyd County Productions, working on a show called Unsupervised, and then it moved on from there. That was a long-winded answer. I don't remember what the original question was.
No, that was great. Thank you for sharing. That was wonderful. I know you have experience with illustration and animation. Is your mic not working?
No, it's fine.
Oh, sorry. And game dev.
Yes.
Do you feel like your skills and experience was a big change from animation to game dev, or?
Yeah, so when I was at Floyd, I'd been there for 5 years, and I had basically graduated into a background director position and was leading a team of I think at one point 9 people, which was a lot. And at that point, I started to get a little bit burnt out. It was a lot of hours, and I just wanted to explore game dev because I'm, huge lover of video games as well. Around that time, my friend reached out to me who had moved to Austin, Texas, to work at EA, and he was like, hey, we have a role that just opened up. I think you'd be really good for it. You should totally apply. And I was looking at it like, I don't know if I'm qualified for it, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I have a job. If I don't get it, whatever. Which that goes to show, if you ever see a job listing that you don't think you're fully 100% qualified for, apply anyway. Please apply, because you never know what kind of things can intersect there and what the manager is actually looking for. 9 times out of 10, nobody is fitting all those requirements, so just FYI, apply, please. I applied to EA, and I was like, I'm just gonna throw my hat in the ring just to see what happens. And suddenly I was getting hired, and I was like, wait, hold on. I wasn't ready to leave Atlanta yet. I love the city. I was like, oh no, but fortunately I got hired in game dev and at EA, and so started as a senior environment artist on the Simpsons title. And the reason why it was such a good fit was because Simpsons was animation adjacent, even though it was a video game that we were making. So my animation experience actually came in handy when it came to applying that knowledge to the game. So they were like, well, you're perfect for this role because we need this. Yeah, and so you never know. But it was interesting because I was nervous about the more technical aspect of it. When you go into games, the entire studios aren't made of artists anymore. They're engineers and game designers and producers. And so I was like, okay, this is an interesting environment. The creative pool is a lot smaller, but we're all still working together to make a unified product. And I was nervous about the engine side of things, but what I realized is that when you're on the job, you learn stuff really, really quick. It took me about 2 months to get up to speed with everything, and I was on the ground running. So, again, if it's a role that you're unfamiliar with, you can, just do it on the job, it'll be fine. You can probably learn it really quickly. And it was a pretty good intersection. It's a very different kind of culture. EA was corporate, Floyd was much more of a homegrown studio environment. So just different rules and regulations, so just a bit of a culture shock.
Wow, cool. Thank you for that. And of these projects, which did you enjoy working on the most, and were you a fan of any of them?
So I loved all the projects I worked on for different reasons, but I have to say I've had the most fun in game development working on the space of 3 days where they would allow us to do a game jam, which is basically you could get together with a small team of your coworkers, you make a game in like 2 to 3 days around some theme, and you kind of just, we were like, okay, we're all doing this, so, we compete and everything, and then we present our game ideas, it has to be playable. And those moments were the most fun I'd ever had because we get to be highly creative with no restrictions and really come up with wacky, insane ideas, and somehow we make it playable. And in 3 days, you have a game in front of you that you all worked on and raised up like your baby together. And it was a really special time in game dev. Not to say that the other projects aren't fun either, but those moments stick out to me as something that, I don't know, I just look at those moments and I love it.
It's nice. With such an extensive resume, how do you juggle so many roles, such as podcasting, being an art director, freelance, and while maintaining balance in your life?
So I'm about to get really personal, because I kind of don't. But the reason why I signed myself up for a lifestyle like this, because I not only do all that, it's not to brag about myself, but I have an Etsy store, I do conventions, I do freelance, I do my personal illustrations, I work full time, and I have a podcast. And so I wanted to kind of get control over my own brain because I realized in 2021, after a lifetime of having it at 35 years old, that I had ADHD. Lifelong ADHD, and I just got diagnosed. And I realized that I had been trying to force myself to concentrate by having imposed deadlines and things that I had to be obligated to do. So I was like, I don't want to roll out of doing my own personal work because I'm so busy doing, full-time work, and I'm not going to focus on it or concentrate unless there's panic ahead. And what happened there was that I was creating everything from a state of panic, and it wasn't conducive to actual good productivity and a positive outlook on my own art. So I'm trying to actually pull the brakes on some of these things right now because I know that I sometimes need to rest. And maybe it's not completely healthy to take on all that stuff all at once. But I did that for a very long time, and what follows is only burnout. And so I can't recommend that lifestyle to anybody, but how I juggle it is I'm slowly not juggling it anymore. I have to establish really strong boundaries between what I do now. If I'm working full time, I make sure that it's in a different room. I close that door or I shut the laptop and I'm done with work. We're not looking at that anymore. We stop at whatever we stop at, and then we go off and rest. And we play Tears of the Kingdom, and we let ourselves be a little potato on the couch for a while before doing any other work.
That's important.
So it's very important. Rest is super important. So rest. I'm resting now.
Perfect. Great answer, great answer. All right, so here's a little bit of information. So the statistics from women in animation said only 34% of creative jobs are held by women, and their goal is to make it 50-50 by 2025. The 2020 survey from Entertainment Software Association last year said while 48% of game players are female, only 24 are game developers. From your personal experience as a Black woman in the industry, do you feel like the industry is lacking in support for women, especially women of color, or is it on its way to improving?
Every industry is lacking in the support of women of color. So yes, it has a long way to go. I think the waves of awareness, especially the ones that happened in 2020 and all the conversations that have been happening, are definitely improving the outlook about hiring people and being more aware that people, like the studios, need to hire more diverse talent. But because everything is so behind, all the industries are very behind, it's gonna take a long time. And I mean, nothing is more dismal than working at a studio that has about 500 game devs and being the only black woman there, which has been my experience twice. So, yeah, and those are big studios. So there's a long way to go, and not only in the way that we hire people, but also in what we represent in our games. In animation, it's getting a lot better, I will say. We're starting to see a lot more diverse content coming out, and I think the animation landscape is more diverse in general, but game dev still has a long way to go. And I've been trying to actively advocate for more people to get in by doing stuff like this, just being visible and letting everybody know that we're out here and we're capable of doing this, and we do it well, because we have to work twice as hard, 4 times as hard to get half of what anybody else gets.
Yeah.
So we do it really well. So we are very worthy of being in the studios just as much as anybody else would.
Absolutely. What do you think the industry in both animation and game development needs to provide more support? Wait, what do you think the industry needs to do to provide more support for more equitable industry, for more of an equitable industry? Yes.
Oh, how much time do you have? I mean, there's a lot. I think they need to start with recruiting, first off.
Okay.
I think oftentimes there's pools that recruiters pull from specific colleges or areas, and those areas inherently are not as diverse as they need to be in order to get the diverse landscape, workers that they need.
Yeah.
And they need to start actually looking at where people are posting their work, where people are being more visible, what events are going on that elevate people of color and minorities and underrepresented artists. And I think that a lot of people say that, oh, this is so hard, it's so difficult to be able to do that, it takes so much extra work. It really doesn't, because I have Painted in Color, and we have a long list of people who are on the slate for interviewing from all different backgrounds and cultures, and there's no way we're ever gonna exhaust that list anytime soon. So we're all out there. They just need to know where to look. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is like, just start doing the work. But then once they get into the studio, oftentimes what would happen was that they would start to get a lot of turnover because they were going into a hostile work environment. So I think everybody who was in the studios also needed to be educated about how to handle a more diverse, having more diverse coworkers. And because the kind of questions that I would get asked sometimes were crazy. Like, people would ask questions about hair, want to touch it. They would want to be like, oh, like what, like, so do you listen to rap music? Like, do you blah, blah, blah? Like, all these stereotypes, because people don't know how to act because they don't see us. So they need training. The employees need training. The managers need training. Everybody needs training to handle people from different backgrounds, and that's real. And EA was starting to do a lot of that kind of work. There's things called employee resource groups that are out there that are pools of employees from, Black employees, LGBTQ plus employees, Asian, Pacific Islander, et cetera. They would have different groups for these employees, and these people would throw different events, different workshops, and encourage and promote classes and learning. So I think more studios need to take that example and do that as well, because that was super helpful, but that was just the start. There's so much work to do. So much work to do. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Excellent. Oh, well, now that you're in a leading position, how does your advocacy play into this role?
That's a great question. So as a manager, it's really important to know how to empathize with the people who you're working with. And I'm sure if anybody's worked in any kind of professional setting at all and has had a bad manager, you want to immediately flee that studio, because it is the worst experience to have that. I took all those bad manager experiences and put it into my experience as to what not to do, and made sure that I was listening to my coworkers, and also making sure that I was adjusting my communication styles to accommodate each one of them, and also to understand, where they come from. What do you get excited about? What lights your eyes up and makes you like rant for 10 minutes about it? Like, that's the kind of things that I want to know, because when you really activate the people who you work with, that's when they do their best work. They feel empowered, they feel seen, they feel heard. And so I try to actively make sure that I'm empowering each of my reports when I have reports, and make them able to do their best work. But really, it's like having to assimilate into many different environments and different cultures, and basically, I had to become a chameleon oftentimes, because you have to fit into a room that has all white people in it, or like fit into a room that has all men in it. And so being able to seamlessly transition from one to the other and then being able to use that communication style to the people that I'm leading, it really goes into helping that a lot. So,
Kind
yeah.
of bridge the gap.
I have to bridge the gap. Yeah, so, yeah, just want to empower my people.
Nice, perfect. Switching gears a little bit, these last questions are a little different. But what inspires you when you create your digital art illustrations? Any particular artists or themes?
I mean, if anybody sees my art, you can tell that I love Art Nouveau. Like, that's just easy. But a big part of my upbringing was just like watching nature documentaries with my dad, and also being outside and just like looking under rocks and seeing like the worlds that were underneath. And so a lot of my art has themes of nature and plant life, but also figures that are blended with nature, because I like to find metaphor in terms of how nature functions and like what we can take from that as lessons about life. And so this piece right here is a part of my avant-garden series, and I have right now 4.5 different queens. I'm working on a new one, and each queen represents a different garden that she cultivates, and each garden represents a different walk of life. So this one's all about adaptation and growing in places where people don't expect you to grow in.
Very cool.
Aww.
Very nice, very nice.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
I just want to let y'all know that we're live streaming on YouTube right now, and all of y'all can put your questions in there, and then we can look at them as this is going on, and then we'll pick our favorite one.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Yeah. If you just search up ASIFA-South on YouTube, it's
Are people allowed to shout out answers live too, or just like they'll all have to be in the YouTube?
do it.
Oh, okay. I mean,
we might do a little bit of both.
oh, the
but-
combination.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
we'll probably
For the
pick our
introverts.
favorite.
Yeah, for the introverts, because I know we out here. I'm an introvert.
All right. So you have a very large social media presence.
Do
Any?
I?
I think so. Like you have a podcast. You have like
Yeah, sure.
You're there.
We're working on it.
Do you have any advice for artists and animators creating a social media brand?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts about that actually, because we have an episode actually on the podcast called Brand versus Style versus Voice, and a lot of young artists especially, we twist ourselves in knots looking for our art style, but I think what's way more important is your artistic voice. And what your voice is a culmination of all the things that you find important and that you find interesting. And why do you make the art? Why do you make the art you make? Why do you find interest in a falling leaf or a big truck or a machine or whatever it could be? There's a reason why, and you look in your own point of view and kind of distill all of that. And all of that, all the stuff that you love and is interesting to you, and the art that you create is your brand. That's your voice. And so that's what I'm so much more interested in seeing when I'm looking at people's portfolios or their websites or whatever it is. I can always tell when an artist understands who they are. Because, I mean, when I was in college, I was trying to chase some impossible standard of like what I thought I should be rather than what I actually was. And once I realized what I was, that's what I started to chase, and that's when the avant-garde was created, and that's when my art identity was created. It was kind of always there, so that's how you kind of make your brand as well. Understand the things that you find interesting. What colors do you like? It doesn't matter why you like them, it's just because you like them. That's the kind of things that define your brand. Are you somebody who, always wants to talk about advocacy in your work? Or do you want to talk about how cool body positivity is, or how awesome, different people of color are, or your own identity, or your culture, etc.? All that stuff is what makes your brand. So really focus on that and elevate that, and that's how you create a strong identity that people will follow you for. So don't try to be anything else but yourself when you're creating your brand.
That's really good. You won an Emmy. That's amazing. What project was that? What project was that for?
Chris, do you have the Emmy as well?
Not on me.
No? I mean, do you have it though? Are you an Emmy winner as well?
Well, we worked in the same episode.
I just wanted to I wasn't on your team, I just want to make sure.
No, I got to hang up the office.
We all got the Emmy. So, yeah, it was on Archer Season 7, Episode 1. It was actually, I power slid into that Emmy because it was right before I left the studio. That was the last episode I worked on. And I was so happy that I managed to get it. But yeah, it was just as a part of a team. The whole studio, we have a certificate, it's up in my wall at home and everything. But yeah, it was really cool to be a part of that.
Was the Emmy process different from a normal process, as in how you're creating this episode?
I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this.
You know what? That's okay. That's okay.
No, but no, it's funny though. Like when you're doing, I'm just going to talk generally.
Sure.
When you're doing Emmy branding, you have to like create assets and things like that that may not have existed before. So like there were some sketches that were done that were not needed or create. Like we didn't work that way, but it was cool to look at. And so, but the process was really just we worked. And we made an episode and it somehow won an Emmy. And I was like, oh, we won an Emmy, that's cool. But there were no demands upon me, my person, specifically.
Cool. So there's a lot of new artists, new people coming into the industry. What advice would you give to anyone coming in, animation and game development? It can be like individual or like a catch-all.
Y'all, it's rough out here. And I understand it's rough out here. Please, I think the best advice that I can give to all of you, I mean, you're doing it right now, is look at each other, the people sitting next to you. This is your community. Use your community. Elevate the people who are next to you. Elevate everybody together. Because we only get through this hard part of this, whatever is happening right now, you know, between AI art and NFTs and all this, and the strikes and all that stuff, like people not wanting to pay artists and everything. We only get through it because we unify together. And so we definitely have to, you know, when you're feeling low, talk to an artist, make friends with people, make sure that you have your community, your network to reach out to, and you support each other. Because as you heard my story, most of my jobs were because people had helped me and people reached out to me and was like, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this. You should apply. That was how I got Zynga as well. So I think that the best thing that you can do as an artist, and I know that we're not encouraged really to go out in the world and talk to everybody because we're supposed to be, you know, in our houses just painting all day in a dark room. That's not how it really works. And I know some of us are introverted, probably a lot of us are introverted, I included, but I cannot tell you how important it is to make those connections, make friends with people, and use that to bolster yourself and also make your art better. Yesterday I was asking for critique from one of my friends because I was like, I'm looking at this too long. Tell me what I need to do here. And even that can be a huge help. So lean on each other because these times are hard right now, but we got this.
What does an art director do? How does a typical workday entail for you?
It's so varied, so that's why I laugh, because it's so many different things. At Wizards looks completely different from at Zynga or at EA, but I can speak for definitely now is that what I do mainly is I am the one who is in charge of the visual look and identity of the campaigns that we are creating and how everything looks cohesively as a unit. Make sure the colors are consistent, make sure that how we represent our brand is consistent. Right now I get to art direct a trailer, like a cinematic trailer, which is super fun. And that's gonna be coming out in September, so look out for that. I can't wait. But it varies day to day, but it's a lot of communicating across different channels, talking about a bunch of different people, checking art assets. I get to commission artists, which is a super fun part of my job. And I get to, you know, kind of like look at everything holistically, give feedback, make sure everything is working together, and we bring it out into the world and hope that it just looks beautiful. And it's pretty similar with game dev as well, only like I have more reports under me and we're all kind of like on a team together. But a lot of it is communication, so like as much as it is directing art itself.
Kind of making all the theme kind of cohesively.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool.
Hey, Roger. You can give this to Lauren and she can pick questions that she might want to answer.
Yes, who has questions?
Okay.
Are we in Q&A yet? Or? Actually, I'm
Well,
gonna take a sip of
let's
water
just
while
do you do that, and we'll ask this last question for myself, and then we'll open it up for you. So lastly, you mentioned your podcast that you co-host called Painted in Color on YouTube. Could you tell the audience a bit about what it is?
Happily. So we started Painted in Color back in 2020 after, you know, all the protests that were happening, and like I was in such a low state then because, you know, I hate seeing my people in pain. It sucked. But out of that, what I realized was that a lot of people had wanted to rise up and do something about it, but a lot of people also didn't want to expend really the effort and make that a continuous kind of drive to make things better for everybody. A few people did, and I think with that wave, it rose the baseline of how many people actually wanted to actively support, which was great. But I really wanted to do something that was meaningful to the art community and to talk about the issues that we face as artists of color, as marginalized artists in the LGBTQ+ community, any marginalized group of people. And what it ended up becoming too was a mental health podcast because we were all struggling with our mental health. It was over COVID, it was rough, y'all. But we wanted to start it because we were like, well, we can create this continuous action and we can, do something about it, even if we only get like 12 subscribers or whatever. If somebody's listening, that will have made it all worth it. So it was me, Mia Araujo, Eric Wilkerson, and Esther Wu who had started this, and we debuted at Lightbox 2020 online, and we did a panel with like artist Bree Henderson and Christian Garland and just amazing people. And we've been running it since then. We're on episode 64 now. We just aired the latest episode this Monday. And we talk about all kinds of different things like advocating for yourself, burnout, how to deal with that, how to start a new project, what our art process is like. We interview a bunch of different artists, from around the industry, people who have written books and have been in the industry for like 20, 30 years, comic artists, animators, etc. Like we have, again, a long roster of people who are slated to be interviewed and so many people who have just lent some amazing insight into what it's like to be a professional artist. But we didn't want to sugarcoat anything with the show. We wanted it to be real. And so as we talk about being a professional, we don't say like, oh, you have to do this. You have to draw, 10 drawings a day in order to be successful. We don't talk like that. We talk much more about having better boundaries around yourself and getting therapy and making sure that you are pacing yourself with your art and making sure that you're making something authentic that means something to you. Not getting underpaid in the art industry. We talk about all that stuff, how to start in conventions. So there's a bunch of topics. If y'all want to check it out, it's on YouTube, youtube.com/c/paintedincolor. So that is the podcast if any of you are interested. But it has been a really wonderful journey, and I am looking forward to making it even bigger and better in the coming year.
I think we have some questions from the audience.
You have a question from a colleague.
A colleague?
Yeah.
What?
I was just asking out loud.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, it's you. That makes sense.
Here, I'll give it to you, I'll give it to you. I'll run there.
Sure.
Run the mic.
All right, so this is a question kind of relating to a lot of your travels you've done for work, because you've been in Austin, you've worked in Austin, you've worked here in Atlanta, and what advice would you have for any young cartoonist who is apprehensive about leaving Atlanta for work?
It can definitely be scary, but sometimes necessary. But hopefully, with what had happened over the lockdown and all that, realizing that remote work was a much more accessible thing to be able to do, there are more jobs that are available that do have remote options. So if you really don't want to leave Atlanta, and if you definitely can't afford it, because a lot of people can't just leave a state, there are opportunities out there for you to be able to work remote. They might be rarer or fewer and far between, and you might have to work harder to get those roles, but they are out there because I am literally doing one of them. I'm working for a company that's in Seattle, and I'm in Atlanta, and I'm making it work. So those possibilities are there, but I will say that sometimes change can be a good thing if you absolutely have to move, and hopefully the company who's hiring you will actually pay for your relocation, because they should, honestly. But it's an opportunity to make new connections and to find a new community, because I had to do that when I was in Austin. I had friends that were there, but I was really lonely when I first moved there. And it took actual concerted effort to make sure that I was getting out of the house and going to places like gaming stores and farmers markets and going bouldering, just trying to meet people that were outside of my sphere and getting a better community. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, aside from just the stress of moving in general.
There's some.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. There's some questions online, but we're gonna do some live questions real quick. Was there any volunteers? Let's say your hand up first. Hello.
And him after. No.
Oh, well, I guess this is a good question to ask out loud. I'm pretty sure every artist has gone through this where they kind of question if they should just this is the mental health part, and of course don't answer if it's too interpersonal. How was your experience when you were really questioning if you wanted to continue pursuing art, and how did you get yourself out of that bubble?
So I've gone through many different phases of like, should I even be an artist anymore, blah, blah, blah. And again, it was reaching out to people and getting outside of the house. Touching grass. Really cool, y'all. We all gotta go and touch grass because nothing is more depressing than just being in the house all day and not getting any fresh air and going outside. I cannot impress upon you enough how important that is to get outside of yourself for a little bit. So usually that would be the step one. But step two, whenever that didn't work, what I started to establish was a system where I put a list on my computer of things that gave me joy. And when I was feeling down and depressed, I would look at that list and be like, okay, like go for a walk, or look at Pinterest at beautiful art, because that always uplifts you, inspire you. Look at your art books, or look at one of your old sketchbooks, because those make me excited. I remember where I came from and why I made art in the first place. Listen to a cool podcast about art, or talk to one of your friends. I would have all these things on the list as a reminder when I was feeling unmotivated, burned out, depressed. One of those things on the list would always help me. So it was about getting a better sense of who I was and what kind of spells that I can go into, and devising new methods on how to get out of them. And sometimes the old methods don't work anymore, and then you have to find new methods. And it's okay if the old ones don't work. But that's probably one of the biggest things that I established when trying to get out of a funk like that. No problem.
All right, online, and then we'll do one more internet.
Sure. All right, back there.
Yeah, I was going to say, something like along lines of productivity, because I feel like my pace when it comes to working on like personal work or just work in general with my art just feels just too slow. Like, yeah, I take it easy on myself. Like, I have a therapist and stuff like that to talk to, and but like sometimes stuff that I work on, like it takes like a week to just get anything done, or sometimes I may have nothing to show for it after like a month, or it just feels like my computer, like I have to hunt it down. It's also the equipment that I have is also super cheap and old, so it's just like what advice would you have towards productivity and also like towards getting better equipment and stuff like that too? Would you have to like, I can say work faster because that work at your own pace, like I said, like you said, but like just something to just help yourself be more efficient.
Yeah, because what I will say is that tools are just tools. You can work, if somebody is prone to working fast, you can work fast with a pencil and paper, some chalk, like a little Wacom Intuos, those little baby guys, or a Cintiq, like it doesn't really matter. So I think what it's much more about is if you're working slow because it's hard for you to get through a piece, you have to think about, why is it so hard to get me through this piece? Am I burnt out? Do I need to change something about the art that I'm making? If you just naturally work slow as an artist, which can happen a lot, some people are very meticulous, which is fine, just understand what projects are worthy of that time. Because, I know in a professional environment it's gonna be different, but at least for your own personal work, understanding, I really want to finish this, and I know that it's going to take me a long time, but I'm really into it. What end is it going to go to? Is it going to end up getting you more work? Is it going to just inspire you? Is it just make you happy? Just know why you're making your art. And lastly, what I will say is that, what kind of environment are you working in? Sometimes if your studio is super messy, or your workspace is like with your bed and everything, and you just want to rest, or the video game is right there, it's not really conducive to a productive environment. So try to fix up your workspace so that it helps you concentrate, so that you're not being distracted by anything that's around you. I don't know what your particular working pattern is, but that's kind of like, that should cover at least 3 of those aspects of why people work slow.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Am I the capybara?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is me. I can ask.
Capybara, that's the best.
Yeah.
We have a question from Capybara Cake.
That's
Capybara
me.
cake. That's so cute.
So, that's funny because that's actually the name of my Etsy shop. So, speaking of,
Yes.
I'm not sure how big Etsy has, Etsy and conventions, how big of a role that's played, since you do have a million things going on. But my partner and I here are looking to get into the convention biz, like the Etsy biz, and make enough of a profit to pay the bills.
Uh-huh.
So what kind of advice do you have for like people trying to get into that? Like looking for what's popular, or like staying true to what your art is, or?
Do not look for what's popular.
Gotcha.
Do not. Do you. Like 100%. I can't tell you, like, chasing trends is, people do it and people are successful at doing it. That ain't me, and that's never gonna be me, and I don't wanna be that. Because what happens is that when the trend goes away, you have a bunch of useless merch that you're trying to get rid of, and it's just annoying. And also, you're not as into it as you would be creating the things that make you happy. Find the things that you enjoy and then give that to your audience and let them come to you because they also enjoy it. And whenever you're authentic, that is inevitably going to happen. So be authentic to yourself. You seem to dress very sunny, your capybara cake, you seem like you make very happy things. Lean into that for sure. Like that seems like it's your theme, roll with it.
Okay.
Don't be ashamed of like what you are or like what kind of identity you have, because when you create things that should feel so easy, that's like, well, this is like, I feel like I should be challenged by myself more. This is so weird. Like, why is it so easy? Because you love it. Let it be easy. It's great. So make the happy things. And about starting an Etsy and conventions, that is a whole thing. There's a lot to consider. This feels like a cop-out, I'm sorry, but I will say that we have episodes around starting in conventions on the podcast that talk specifically about like what kinds of things to buy, what kinds of art to sell, how much of prints that you should make or what other merch to make. So we talk about all that and break it down. But if you want to ask me any more specific questions, I'm always available and happy to answer because there's a lot of learnings and insights that I've had in 12 years of doing cons. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Thank you.
But good luck.
That's it for the questions. Feel free to ask Ms. Brown. Any questions? Hold on, I'm trying to find my questions. Here it is. So again, we are having a raffle for Lauren's print from the RSVPers. Ask people. Oh, okay. This is for ASIFA-South, but let's give it a round of applause for our guest speaker. Okay. People please RSVP to pre-register for headcounts, which helps us prepare.
I can tell you if I'm
It's
done.
all good.
I can mosey up and
You
say.
need a spotlight.
I did want to say though, I also bought some extra enamel pins with me for people who specifically had asked questions. I probably should have told y'all that beforehand, but I have them. So yeah, please feel free to come up afterwards and get your free pin from me.
Also, everyone say goodnight to the stream.
Good night.
Stream. Wanna do a raffle?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Lauren, will
Yes.
you close your eyes and pick?
Oh.
Oh wait, we'll do the raffle.
I'm going up and down, up and down, up
Also,
and down.
don't know how to turn it off.
Yeah.
Okay, Darius Hill.
Who's Darius? It's you.
That's Darius Hill. Hi, Congratulations, Darius.
I'm asking myself, what if I won and it didn't happen? Like,
Take a sign as well. 3, 2, 1, cheese.
Say bye.